That's what we have to do, isn't it? We have to do a selfie. Is the first thing we have to do. Why do we do that?
To validate ourselves.
Remind you of what? The experience.
Are you proud of what you're doing so you want to share it?
We want to share it. Yes. And people, you go to a restaurant, who has taken a photo of their dinner?
Every time.
In the last 24 hours. And if you think, what we're doing now via social media is exactly what you would do if you were actually with your friends. You know, the waiter would bring you food, it'd be some massive burger like this, and you'd go, oh, that looks good. And that would be it, conversation over. But now, because you're not with all the people you want to say that to, you have to take a picture of it, share it on Facebook and tweet it, and then people have to join in and all that sort of stuff. And when we get together in groups, we want to have a record of it, we want to share it, we want to say to other people, look who I'm with. We want to broadcast information about our social status, our social groups, because we're a social species. And therefore what we depend on as a social species, absolutely, is what?
Social media?
Yes. But even before communication, yes. And to be able to communicate with someone.
Being able to understand.
Understanding, yes.
Other people.
Yes.
To have rapport.
Yeah.
Ego.
Eye contact, yeah. Well, like a relationship. We have to have a relationship, some connection with another person or other people. And whether that's face to face, whether it's through social media, whether it's through coming to an event like this, whatever we do, we are relating to each other as members as a social species, and that relationship, that communication, doesn't always go smoothly. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Sometimes what we think we've communicated isn't what the other person seems to have received, or so on. So what we could do with, what we could all do with, is ways to improve the way that we relate to each other as a social species. Because you, believe it or not, you're not seeing me really right now. You're not really seeing the room, you're not seeing each other, because there's far too much information here for you to make sense of. There's far too much going on for you to really pay attention to. So right now you might be concentrating on the sound of my voice, listening to the words, you might be looking at me, but you're probably not aware of the feeling of your feet within your shoes. You might be aware of the temperature of the room because it's a bit warm. You might be aware of the light in the room because it's a bit dark. But other things, like the weight of your left hand, or whether you are balanced, whether whether you're tilted to the side or something like that, you're probably not aware of, because you don't need to be. You only need to be aware of what's happening, what's changing. So all of our senses, and how many senses do we have?
6.
More than 19. At least 19, probably more. Discrete, totally separate systems connecting some sort of receptor through a nerve pathway to a primary processing centre in the brain. So for example, what we call touch, we have different senses of what? What are the different senses of touch? Temperature. Yes, not just temperature, but two different senses for heat and cold.
Yep.
Hence you can feel hot and cold at the same time.
Pressure.
Pressure, yes.
Texture.
Pain.
Yes. Pain, yes. Balance. And something called proprioception. Anybody know what that is?
Awareness of where your limbs are.
Yes, yes. Awareness of what your body's doing even though you can't see it. And people who've lost that sense through some damage to the brain, their arms wander off if they're not looking at them. They don't know what their hands are doing. They're like a baby who's had children. And if you remember when your children are very, very young, they just move their arms randomly. They don't know what they're grabbing for. Their arms and their legs are just all over the place until they start to calibrate, until they start to connect feedback loops within their brain. And then they know exactly what to do. And who remembers, probably more the mothers in the room, who remembers taking the child to the doctors, or maybe the health visitor came around and did the little test where they put something in their hand to see if the child can pick it up. Anybody remember that one? What are they testing now?
Whether they pick up with thumb and forefinger or the whole hand.
Yes, yeah. hand-eye coordination, which is very complex. They're testing to see if the child can make out what's in the hand, can see that it's something that's different to the hand, can therefore figure out that it's some separate three-dimensional object that can be handled, see if it gets their curiosity, see if they want to pick it up, and can they coordinate. And if you think, it's extremely difficult for us to get robots and computers to do this. This is an extraordinarily complex task. What your brain is able to do from that very early age. When do they do that test? How old is the baby when they do that test? Much younger than that. It's about 6 months old, isn't it? Something like that. It's incredible what the brain is able to do. What it's figured out by itself, through trial and error, is to take what is essentially a flat representation of the three-dimensional world, because we're like looking at a screen, really. Two different screens, viewed from two slightly different angles through which we can guess at depth. It's working out that something is separate to the thing behind it, the hand. It's working out where in space it is, and it's converting those essentially XY coordinates to movement in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 joints. To bring that point there into the same position in space as the bit of, plastic or whatever it is in the doctor's hand. It's incredibly complicated. We really struggle to program robots to be able to do that. They certainly can't figure it out for themselves. Although we're not that far off, it's now a matter of time. The what the genome is? You know what I mean by the genome? It's your DNA coding that's in your cells. Do you know what your phenome is? Your phenome is your physical expression of your DNA. And it isn't the same as what your DNA would predict. Because the cells don't copy perfectly. Your body doesn't grow perfectly. So two identical twins are not actually identical. So now in the brain we have something called the connectome, which is literally how your brain is wired. And that's partly what you inherited and partly what you've learned throughout the whole course of your life. What scientists have done is they've mapped the connectome of a worm. It's only 340 neurons, it's not quite on the scale of the 90 billion that you've got. And they've taken those neuron connections, programmed those into the software of a robot, and the robot behaviour emerged from that programming that was analogous to how the worm behaves. So it responded in the same way to the same stimulus. So that means that mapping the connections within a brain and transferring that into software is no longer a matter of technology. It's now only a matter of time. So that allows us to replicate a mind. It doesn't tell us anything about how the mind works. Because the reality is we didn't make it, we didn't design it, so we don't really know how it works. We can only guess at that from the external interfaces and the external relationships that we have. So, for example, has anyone ever had a friend who suffered from depression?
Yes.
And you know that person's depressed even though they don't, yes? The depressed person doesn't know that they're depressed. They just think there's something wrong with everybody else, because it's like they're looking at the world through a coloured filter. But other people see a difference through their relationships with them. So if we had ways to understand relationships, understand why people do what they do, how they do what they do, we could do lots of interesting things with that. So for example, do any of you have a colleague at work who aggravates you, who irritates you? Do you think, why on earth are they stupid? Could they not see the right way to do that? Why are they always doing that? Do any of you have somebody you've ever worked with who you think those sorts of thoughts about? And wouldn't it be interesting if we could decode the software in their brain, we could actually figure out what it is that makes them do what they do, why they do it, for what purpose, what triggers certain reactions, what it is that's happening around them that triggers them to react in a certain way, and then that reaction, that perception, causes them to behave in a certain way. And sometimes, even though people's behaviour can seem really weird and random, it's actually entirely predictable. And I bet for all of you, there's somebody who you know so well, who you're so close to, you've known for so long, that you could predict with a very high degree of accuracy what their reaction would be to something, or what they would like for their birthday, what sort of thing that they would like, or a place that they would like to go. You know them that well that you can predict things about them. Would that be fair? And normally it takes us a long time to get to know somebody that well, to figure out what makes them tick. But actually there are ways that we can figure out what makes people tick much quicker. We can do two things with that. If somebody does something that's really amazing, like somebody is a really good mediator, for example, and they're really good at getting two people to start communicating and understand each other, and they seem, you can't really see what they're doing that's different, but the results they get are different, so there must be something they're doing differently. We can decode that, we can decode those mental processes, and we can teach that as a routine or a way of thinking to other people. That's modelling with NLP. The other thing that we can do, if that person's behaviour, their repetitive behaviour is something that they don't want, something that they, I don't know, causes them other problems in their life, or something that interferes with other relationships, we can similarly find out how they do that, how they reproduce that behaviour. What could we do then? If we understood how somebody created some behaviour that's a problem for them, what could we do with that?
Dismantle it.
We could dismantle it, we could bypass it, we could change it in some way, we could help that person to behave differently. So, has anybody here ever given up smoking? Successfully given up smoking? So we could find out, how did you do that? If we want to teach people how to give up smoking, what we want to do is find people who have given up smoking, who used to smoke and now don't, and we want to find out, what do they do? And then that's what we want to teach to people who want to give up smoking. Because it doesn't work to put pictures of dead lungs on cigarettes. It kind of looks like it ought to work, but it actually doesn't really. Because the problem the government have is, of course, they make so much money on tax on cigarettes. They want you to give up smoking, but not too quickly. So, if we could understand and decode these patterns of behaviour, we could change them, we could teach them to other people, we could do all kinds of interesting things with them. And that's really the essence of what NLP is all about. Now, it's not about making big, massive changes in your life, solving big problems, because actually, you're all really good at solving big problems. You know, some problem in your house, or your car breaks down, or you've got a problem with your computer. You're good at solving those sorts of problems. Right? The human brain is really good at solving problems. Because the human brain, or particularly the human mind, is a simulator. We simulate reality. That's why I say, you're not really seeing me right now. What you're actually seeing is a memory of me, pieced together from parts you saw when you first saw me. Has anybody here seen me before? Just John and Sue? Oh, yeah. Yes, you were at the group in Manchester. So you're seeing bits of what's happening now, pieced together with bits of memories, pieced together with bits of what you think should be happening now, pieced together with bits from other people. So I had a phone call today. I had an inquiry last week for some training, and I sent off an email. I got a call from somebody today. She said, oh yeah, I looked through all the emails of the trainers who responded to the request, and she said, oh, I just saw yours, and I thought, yeah, I just read yours, and I thought, yeah, definitely Peter's the one, and, so I'm not going to bother talking to the rest of them. I thought, oh, that's nice. I was thinking about what I wrote in the email. I thought, oh, that was good. And then a bit later on, and she said, it's a corporate client, it's fine. She said, but am I right in understanding your experience is mainly in the public sector? I said, no, my experience is mainly corporate. She said, oh, I must have misread, I read something in your email about the Cabinet Office. And I'm thinking, that wasn't my email. Whatever. She thinks it is, that's the main thing. I once wrote an article on leadership for a magazine, and when it got published, it was somebody else's article, and they put my name on it. It was a much better article than mine. It was really academic and analytical, and mine was a bit more sort of, weird. So people will attribute things to you based on what they remember from the past or what they remember from other people. Because there's too much going on. We can't pay attention. There's too much happening around us all the time. even in such a quiet place as there's too much going on. So we know, and when I say we, I mean the scientific body of knowledge. Many experiments have been done around just how much of memory is actually, or how much of experience is pulled together from snippets of memory as opposed to actually experienced in real time. Has anybody here ever had a car crash? Did everything seem to slow down? And you remember every little detail? But things seem to slow down? No? Okay. But some of you did experience that. Yes, some of you nodded then, slowing down, remember every detail. And then did you find that after the accident, like a little movie of the accident replayed itself over and over again? Yeah. And over time it got less and less frequent. Did you find that? Wonderful, isn't it? What's happening is your brain is devoting all of its, to use a, not exactly a precise term for it, but your brain devotes all of its processing power to what's going on. So it seems like time slows down. And then afterwards, a part of your brain called your hippocampus?
That's a memory.
Memory. Yeah, what it does is it replays that little snippet of memory over and over again. And it's the way that your brain deals with trauma. So they've actually done experiments where they put a mouse in a box and they simulated two traumatic events. One was an elevator falling and the other was an earthquake. For the elevator fall, they dropped the box. And for the earthquake, they shut the box. And they put electrodes in the mouse's brain. And what they saw happening in the mouse's brain was that memory of the event replaying itself over and over and over again. Just like what we experience when we have something happens like a car crash. So your brain is desensitizing your senses to that exact trauma from happening again. So when we do things like, we put people through stress tests and we simulate, what do you call them? Simulate emergencies and, like a fire drill, and you recently had a nice evacuation drill up here, didn't you? Earlier this week, which were very successful. But it did seriously. I mean, everyone's focusing on the mistake that the guy made in leaving the fake bomb. But look at what actually happened. Everyone thought it was real. And evacuated beautifully, without any fuss. So I think that was worth doing anyway. So that part of your brain replays the memory over and over again. So what happens is, we tend to learn things, and we tend to learn reactions, which you're not a mouse being chased by a cat. Life isn't that simple. The things that cause you stress in your life are much more complex. There are things like deadlines and conflict at work and what else? What else causes you stress?
Traffic.
Traffic, yes. Car not starting. What else?
Rules. Unnecessary rules.
Unnecessary rules. Is there such a thing?
Yes.
As an unnecessary rule?
Money.
Unnecessary.
Half of them. We just don't know which half. Rules. What else causes you stress?
Your partner.
Your partner? My partner? How did you know that? I thought you said we hadn't met. So a partner.
Yeah.
So a relationship might cause you stress. Okay, what else might cause you stress?
Children.
Children? Yeah. What else?
I think both phones cut off,
I think both phones cut off.
the mobile and your landline.
See, somebody would call that
It's liberating.
for peace and quiet. The point is that stress, just like in a mechanical system, is the result of opposing forces trying to get a system to do two different things at the same time. And that stress in the mechanical system, like a car engine, causes what? Friction, which causes heat, which causes malfunction, mechanical failure. Yes, exactly. And in your body, what effect does stress have?
Malfunction.
Malfunction. Yes, you have stress-related illnesses. What kind of stress-related illnesses do you have? Eczema, yes, good. Psoriasis. Depression, yes,
And
yes.
panic attacks.
Panic attacks, yes, excellent.
Insomnia.
Yes, excellent. So, at the end of each strand of your DNA, there are little regions of redundant links in the chain, if you call them that. Anybody know what they're called?
Telomeres.
Telomeres. And what do they do?
They are disposable, so that when replication takes place, if something goes wrong, you can afford to lose the bits at the end.
Yes.
Redundancy.
Redundancy. They are there to provide redundancy to reduce copying errors. Because in DNA, a copying error is what?
Cancer, in fact.
Could be cancer.
Could be.
Exactly. Could be a mutation. It could be that you develop the ability to control magnetic fields, or become invisible. Unlikely. More likely to turn into cancer. And so, as your cells reproduce, replicate over your life, these telomeres at the end of the DNA chain get shorter. Stress makes them shorten faster. Stress can reduce your lifespan by 20 years. Because stress accelerates the rate at which your cells lose their ability to reproduce or replicate without errors. Best case, those cells reproduce with errors and they just don't function and they just die off and get replaced. Worst case, I may say. So, it would be useful if we had ways to reduce stress and deal with these stressful situations. Would you agree? So whether it's relationships, whether it's stress, whether it's setting goals, getting more what you want out of life, NLP is a synthesis really of tools and techniques taken from different areas of psychology, of psychiatry, of psychotherapy, but also underlying that, the essential modelling skill set of NLP is a set of tools by which we can decode what somebody's doing inside their head and we can reproduce it. If they're amazing at making sales calls, we probably don't want to reproduce that because I get enough of those already. But if they're really, really good at doing something like, I don't know, driving a racing car or giving up smoking or whatever it might be, we want to reproduce that into other people. And if it's something that that person wants to change, so what happens inside your brain has 6 functional layers. Bottom layer is where your nerves come in, the sensory nerves come in, and your motor nerves go out. So if you take an animal like a frog has a very simple nervous system. It's really just one layer or 2 layers, it's just in, out, that's it. So when you pass your hand over a frog, what does a frog do? Jump. Why does it jump?
It's a reaction
To the shadow. Because the shadow is potentially a what? A threat. Specifically a bird of prey. So when you pass your hand over a frog will jump. It doesn't stop and think, oh, what's that? It's a big, no, it's not a bird, it's a grass. It doesn't do that. It just gets out the way, which may be useful, may not be. What we as human beings can do, we can go, oh, that's interesting, what's that big, those points, they look like teeth. Oh, well they are teeth. As a guy died this week, didn't he? And where was it? An alligator. Crocodile, alligator, where was that? Was it in America somewhere? Australia, that was it. Crocodile in Australia.
A small boat.
Yes. Crocodile capsized the boat, killed the one guy. The other guy fended it off by throwing spark plugs at it. Top tip there. Always carry spare spark plugs in case of crocodile attack. Clearly, that spark plugs are a crocodile's kryptonite. It's Achilles heel. So, people die because they stop and think, oh, what's that? But what we do is, this thinking that we do, the thinking that you're doing right now when you try and figure out whether what I'm saying is true or a load of rubbish, this thinking is what happens at the top layer, that wiggly layer on the surface of the brain that you see when you see a picture of the brain. So when we think about something, the thought process goes all the way up to the 6th layer and then comes back down again before we act. So when we're doing something that we've never done before, we're really, really slow. Who here has learned to play a musical instrument? Or play any kind of sport like badminton, tennis, some pools, and that sort of thing? And would you agree that at first you're quite clumsy, takes a while, and then you get into a kind of flow with it, and certain movements become automated? So, anybody here a badminton player? So, with, if you're a badminton player, you can just hold your hand. If I say backhand, if I say backhand and play it, so it just drops over the net, you'll probably do that. So, it's just instinctive, isn't it? Musical instrument. Anybody play a musical instrument? What do you play?
Guitar.
Guitar. Where is the B flat?
It's on the A string first. Oh, that's right.
Okay. How did you know that?
Just it's been repetition.
It's a repetition. You just know it. You just know it. Anybody else? Anybody play a wind instrument? No? Anybody play a wind instrument? Clarinet or flute or anything? I don't play the flute. The C is there. B flat's there. It's just instinctive. It's very difficult to explain because the more you practice, these connections in the brain, these pathways in the brain, they drop down. So we start off, when we first do something, we have to think about it, and that takes a long time. We're really slow. There's no way you could get out of the way of a striking rattlesnake. You cannot move that fast. But once you've done it a few times, you get quicker. Because these connections, they resolve down through the layers of your brain until you can do something instinctively without thinking about it, without pause or hesitation, and you can do it fast. So what we've got is, unlike the frog, we've got the best of both worlds. We can learn new reactions, and we can then practice those reactions so that they're really fast. The problem is that by definition, once we've practiced that reaction that it's so fast, we no longer know that we're doing it. The reaction takes place before we are even aware that the stimulus is present. So we've put people in MRI scanners and they've presented them with a stimulus. And that person's body has started to react about half a second before the person was even aware that the stimulus was present. And the person then confabulated, made up a reason as to why they made the decision that they did. So what actually happened was their brain at the very lowest motor level reacted to the stimulus. And the person then asked, why did you do this, or why did you make that decision? What they then did was they made up a reason that sounded convincing or plausible. It wasn't actually the reason why they reacted the way that they did. So when you react to somebody at work who aggravates you, who's got somebody at work or who you work with currently, who, as soon as you hear their whiny, grating voice, you can just, I feel your force field go up. Anybody got anybody at work like that now?
It's me.
is that person in the room?
I can't think of it right now.
Would you give me a hand with the demonstration?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm going to show you a really simple NLP technique. This is called a swish. Lots and lots of different ways of doing the swish. I'm going to show you first the way that we do it on training courses, because this is an easy way to demonstrate and it's an easy way to play with. So this person, could you give us a, you can, if you,
Paul.
Paul. Oh, that's a horrible name. What happens? So is it Paul's voice, or you see Paul coming in, or you hear his
It's just the
footsteps?
very
or-
idea of Paul.
The very idea.
Makes
Makes,
my skin crawl.
and who knew he was going to say makes my skin crawl? Who knew he was going to say that? That was in his mind. Interesting. That's rapport, by the way. Rapport and empathy, which we all have as a social species, allows us to see someone else's behaviour and we reproduce it in our own motor cortex. So we feel what they're feeling. Who here is a coach? Who does any kind of coaching work? Any kind of one-to-one counselling, therapy, anything at all of that kind. Have you ever felt uncomfortable or tightness in your chest when your client's talking about, yeah? And you're not making that up. That's not your feeling, that's theirs. What you're feeling is their fear. What a lot of inexperienced coaches do is they get to that point, they feel uncomfortable and they stop. Because they think it's them that feels uncomfortable. It isn't, it's the client. That's why when I'm doing practitioner training, I don't do rapport exercises. Because we're a social species, we're already good at being in rapport. What we need to learn is how to not be in rapport. We need to learn how to manage the degree of rapport we have. Because it's not a way for us to influence someone else. It's too late. So while you think you're influencing your client, they're influencing you, and you're not even aware of it. So, I'm going to do something called a swish. I'm sorry, your name is?
Jared.
Jared.
Yeah.
That's okay, Jared. So, what's the very, very first instant that what's the very first thing that happens in the office that
It's
causes
not
you to
office
think?
environment, it's
Not
a
office.
building site environment.
Building site, okay. So what's the very, very first thing that makes you aware of Paul? Is it either his voice, you
The
see
van.
him? Is that what you see or what you hear or is it what you see? So you see
Drive
his
up to
van,
site, see the van.
see the van, and you feel sinking feeling,
Yeah, I want the van to not be there.
you want the van to not be there.
It has actually just gone recently. But it was there for about 4 months.
And so is Paul still there even though the van's gone?
There.
He's not.
Just around the corner.
No.
It's not far enough away. I still see the van.
Do any of you know any rough types, any of these sorts of
It's
words
more
or-
complicated than that. We can't just deal with it like that.
Oh, it's a building site. I thought that's
It's intricately woven.
Ah,
There's
it's
money
a
involved.
high-end building site.
Yeah.
Okay, all right then. So, what we're going to do is we're going to interrupt Jared's thought process, and we're going to put in a new idea. Now, if any of you have done NLP training, I'm guessing you'll have been taught with the swish that we take the undesirable pattern of behaviour and then we put in a desirable outcome, a new outcome. Would that be correct, those of you who have done the NLP training? That's wrong, because that's not generative. All that we're doing there is we're taking one repetitive pattern of behaviour and replacing it with another. So actually Jared still doesn't have the thing that we say is most important in NLP. He still doesn't have choice. So what we need to do, so this is why I said this workshop tonight be useful both for people who are new to NLP and also if you've done some NLP training you'll get something out of it as well. What we're going to do is we're going to replace that trigger of Paul and the van with random things. So Jared can no longer react the way that he has been reacting to Paul. He's got to figure out a new way of reacting, and we're almost kicking that connection right back up to the top level. So it's, Paul, van, I'm not sure how I feel about that. That's the sort of result that we're looking for. So the Jared will figure out a new response for himself. So he's in control of it, it's his choice. Rather than we're just going to, replace it with a different type of reaction. Like a typical thing, somebody might say, I'm afraid of spiders. Well, how do you want to react to spiders? Well, I want to like them. No, you don't. You don't want to like spiders, they're horrible things. We're actually, in evolutionary terms, we're actually hardwired to be afraid of spiders and snakes. Mostly because they are dangerous. They might not be, but there's no value in finding out. I know some. Anybody got spiders and snakes as pets? Anybody? No, not for that. So we're going to take that reaction. I'm going to ask you to make a picture of the van. So as you come in and you see through your windscreen, maybe the van. Make a picture of that there.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
Horrible.
Horrible. Where? Horrible here? Like a sinking feeling?
Everywhere. Like the whole body horrible.
A whole body horrible.
Yeah.
So one of the most important things that we do when we get into learning NLP is something called anchoring. And anchoring is a way that we create a new trigger, a new stimulus for a response. What most people do with anchoring is they learn it by sort of fiddling with their fingers or tweaking on the earlobe or something in order to feel confident or feel good or resourceful or something like that. That's not a useful way to think of anchoring, I would suggest to you. What we're actually doing with anchoring is we're using it to control the client's reactions. Because I don't want Jared to get that feeling of his skin crawling when he gets round to thinking about Paul. I want him to feel that way when I want him to. So that I can control the timing of when I interrupt that thought. Who's had the experience of being in the middle of some repetitive activity and you get interrupted, like the phone rings, and you just feel totally, you have no idea what you're doing or who you are and what's going on. You feel disoriented for a moment until you see something that you latch onto and you think, ah, that's what I was doing. Like you've got, the eye in your hand, or you look at what email you were sending and that reminds you, gets you back on track. So we're going to do that, but we're going to do it purposefully, and we're going to use the anchor of the picture of the van on my hand, which now if I just hold that picture of the van, what I can see is that the anchoring has been effective. It's only temporary, we'll have forgotten it by the morning. But for now, if I hold a picture of the van, we see a reaction. Now, if I held a picture of something that made you feel fantastic and full of energy and confidence, that would be one way that we could use anchoring. It's a trivial way of using anchoring. So, somebody tell me a random fruit.
Pineapple.
Mango.
Oh no, pineapple was first. Who was pineapple? Who said that? Pineapple. Okay, thank you. So, in my hand, I want to make a picture of a pineapple.
Okay.
Bit sort of spiky, nice and green on top. Pineapple kind of smell. Got that?
Yeah, nice.
And what we're going to do is we're going to take that picture of Paul's van, replace it with a picture of a nice juicy pineapple. Okay?
Okay, yeah.
Have you travelled far to be here tonight?
About half an hour.
Half an hour. Okay, so good. Hold on for time. Somebody give me somebody suggest a filling of a sandwich. Cheese.
Egg mayonnaise.
Egg mayonnaise.
Beef and gravy.
What? Oh yeah, we're in Manchester. Beef and gravy. Wouldn't it just all run out of the sandwich?
Yeah, but we have a plate.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm from Birmingham, we don't have plates. I'm going to go with egg mayonnaise. So, picture an egg mayonnaise sandwich. Does it have cressing or not?
It does now, yeah.
It does. so suggestive. So, picture an egg mayonnaise sandwich with cress in it, just sitting there. You've got Paul's van and an egg mayonnaise sandwich.
I don't know if I like an egg mayonnaise.
We don't know if you like Paul.
You do.
One more thing, a pet, an unusual pet.
Iguana.
An iguana. Can you picture an iguana?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Or a chameleon, will I do? Close enough.
Chameleon?
I'll
They're
leave it up
smaller,
to you.
cuter,
Have
yeah.
a choice.
Chameleon.
Smaller and cuter. Okay.
The
So-
iguana wouldn't fit in your hand.
Got a okay, so you got a chameleon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Paul's van. Chameleon.
Yeah, that's nice.
Now, try as hard as you can to imagine yourself driving into the building site tomorrow morning and seeing Paul's van there and let me know what's different.
And I'll see a chameleon in the back of it.
How does that, this is important,
Pineapple.
how does that
Just
affect,
through here.
how does that
I like
affect,
chameleon. Chameleon's nice.
so how does that affect the feeling
Well, I
that you
see
have?
the van less, and I just look at the chameleon.
You see the van less?
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? See, we're not looking to make massive changes like Gerald's suddenly got to go to, Paul being his best mate and all that stuff. That's not realistic. We don't need to do that. All we need to do is disrupt the reaction. And Gerald will do the rest. Gerald will go to work, he'll see Paul's van, he'll think of the chameleon, he'll smile. And that will change how he interacts with Paul, and that will change how Paul interacts with him, because they are in a relationship. Whether they like it or not, they're in a relationship, and therefore they are affecting each other. So, if you want to change somebody else's behaviour in any kind of relationship, like at work or whatever, if you want to change somebody else's behaviour, that's the very first thing you've got to change. Your own behaviour, because that will affect their reactions to you. So, thank you very much, Jared. Thank you very much for that explanation. So, is anybody interested in pairing up and having a go at the swish, or would you want to move on to something else? Move on to something else. Okay. So, the swish is, this isn't really the right way to say it, but the metaphor I use is that anchoring allows us to make new connections in the person's mind, and the swish allows us to break them. So not really breaking them. It's disrupting, or it's providing alternatives, or it's providing a new reaction or a new path, or opening up new possibilities, that kind of thing. But do you see how that's useful? Because very, very quickly we can disrupt a reaction, and then the person's off in a different direction. And if you went to work knowing that somebody who used to wind you up now makes you laugh, and they don't know why it makes you laugh, but it's like your little private joke, would that change how you felt about going to work? Would that affect the level of stress that you felt? So NLP is not about making huge changes, it's about making very, very tiny changes, but very tiny changes now. Because a tiny change now that nudges you in a slightly different direction will take you off, and a day or a month or a year from now you'll be in a very different place. Anybody agree or disagree with that? That's really what it's about. So I'm not here to say, oh yes, NLP is a panacea, you can do all these wonderful things with it. You can do wonderful things with the tools and techniques of NLP, but the real power is in you, is in the client to actually do something on a daily basis, do something different. Right, so, common problems. Let's get some common problems. What are the little niggly problems that you have that really don't seem big enough for you to have ever done anything about it, but you know that it affects you? Like a little niggly frustration, or something that, like procrastination, or something that you do that you kind of catch yourself doing it, and then you think, oh, I'm not going to do that. I promised myself I wasn't going to do that again. And then the next time you do it all over again, that kind of thing. What niggly little problems do you have in your life that if you could solve those problems, it would actually make quite a big difference? Because each instance by itself is tiny, but when you add them all up, it's worth doing something about. What kind of things?
Decision making.
Decision making. Lovely.
Looking at your phone too much.
Lovely.
Being easily distracted.
Lovely.
One task at a time.
Is that the problem, or is that what you'd like?
Would like instead of doing several, just do, not doing several tasks.
Okay, great. One more? From over this side of the room? Who's got one?
Negative self-talk.
Lovely. Lovely. One of the really important things, if you go on to learn anything about NLP, is that a large part of NLP, well, central to NLP, really, because it's the L, it's in the middle, central, do you get it? No? Is language, linguistic, neuro-linguistic programming. Language. So what the name means, NLP, neuro, as in mind and brain and nervous system. Linguistic, as in language, programming just means behaviour. What that tells us is there is a relationship between a person's language and their behaviour. So, for example, the first one, decision making, what does that tell us? What does that form of language tell us?
The person's afraid of making the wrong decision.
She's afraid of making the wrong decision. How do you know that?
Because they're not committing to a decision because they're worried of the consequences that decision might make.
Okay, and otherwise it wouldn't be up there. Who said that? Yeah, otherwise I wouldn't have said it.
They wouldn't have thought about it.
Right, okay, interesting.
It's phrased in the abstract.
Go on.
It's phrased in the abstract decision making rather than I struggle to make decisions. They said decision making as more of an abstract, as a thing rather than identifying with it personally.
Yes, very good. You were the closest without going over. So what it tells us is decision. It's a special type of word that sounds like a thing, but it isn't a thing. Like meeting, or relationship, or what? It's called a nominalisation. We take a verb and we turn it into a noun. So we take the verb to decide and we turn it into a noun, decision. And we can put it in language as if it's a thing, an object, decision making. So we could replace that with chair and it would make sense, chair making. Or other kinds of making, thing making. What other kind of thing making now? Cake making? Bread making. Child making. Baby making. No, stick to bread making. That'd be quite nice. So, bread making makes sense. So the word decision has become a thing, but it isn't a thing, it's an activity. And something very special happens when we hear from a person's language they've turned an activity into a thing. What happens is they become passive to it. Because when something is a thing, it can act. It can be acted upon. But a decision, to decide, is the action. So what they've told us is that they've taken the process of deciding and they've frozen it in time. And now it's the decision, the thing that is in control. And we've got a word missing here.
Process.
We've got the decision, which is active, it's acting. We've got the process, which is the making. And we've lost the thing that gets acted upon. Bread makes me full. Decision makes me sad. Who said decision making? What does the decision make you?
Confused.
Confused. And there's another normalisation. So it's a symptom that the person is saying, it's almost as if in their mind they're saying, whoa, stop. I can't deal with all this information, just stop everything, let me just think about it for a year or two. Would that be fair? It's
Not
just
quite
like,
as long as that. but
not
yeah.
quite as long as that, but you just want to too much, just stop. And the thing is, you can stop making a decision, you can stop deciding anytime you want, but when you stop deciding, what have you done? You decided. Yes. By definition, wherever you are. So, I don't know, you might have been to a restaurant with a friend and they get the menu and they say, oh, I fancy red wine, but oh, if I have red wine, I have to have the beef, and I really fancy the chicken, but if I have chicken, I have to have white wine. I really fancy the red wine. I just go round and round and round. And then the waiter comes and says, can I take your order? And I say, yeah, I'll have the chicken. And the waiter goes away, they go, oh, I really fancy red wine. They don't stop. It's just the waiter came in and took a snapshot of the deciding process at a particular time, but they hadn't actually decided. And at the end of the day, does it really matter? Honestly, beef, chicken, do you know what, have the other one tomorrow. It's not a big, have an egg mayonnaise sandwich, cheese sandwich, whatever you, gravy sandwich, whatever you want. It doesn't matter, it's only food. People make a big deal out of it because it isn't the sandwich or the beef or the chicken or the person's van or whatever it is. That isn't the problem. They're just examples of the problem. It's the process, the underlying thought process that creates the problem.
I made my decision today, and I just figured no decision was a bad decision, so just made the decision.
Very good. So apparently I look at my phone too much. Because she said looking at your phone too much. Right? Now, for those of you who don't know NLP training, what we're doing now is what's called meta-model analysis. Meta-model is it's a way of looking at language that allows us to see a deeper meaning. Not in the words, but in the structure of the words. There is nothing in the words decision and making that tells us that, sorry, what's your name? Natalia. There's nothing in the words decision or making, there's nothing in the context, the content or the dictionary definitions that tells us anything about, that she's stopped and there's too much information and stuff. But it's the structure, it's the verb tense that tells us that. So it's the structure of people's language that is the same as the structure of their behaviour, which is the same as the structure of the thought processes and the experiences that give rise to that language and that behaviour. So when we hear a pattern in someone's language, we can predict there'll be a similar pattern in their behaviour. So with this one, if you've done NLP training, what would you have been taught to respond to this one?
Someone playing somebody else all the time.
Right. Yes. You might have been taught, or the trainer might have demonstrated saying, I look at my phone too. Who said that? Who said about the phone? What's your name?
Joanne.
Joanne. So the trainer might say, I look at what you say, that I look at my phone too much, and you would have said,
No, me.
you. Yeah. So I would have forced you to own your statement and take responsibility for it and acknowledge that it's you looking at your phone too much.
It's interesting.
Which doesn't help. What she's actually doing is something far more interesting. So, is anybody familiar with the documentary maker Louis Theroux?
Yes.
He did a terrific one, well they're all terrific, he's amazing, at getting people to tell him all kinds of stuff just by acting naive. It's brilliant. And there was one, if any of you saw it, where he was interviewing retired porn stars. Did anyone see that one?
Yeah.
And there was a woman in a house, and the wife and the husband had both been porn stars, retired. Well, the wife had retired, the husband had been sort of in and out, and had gone into back to that line of work and then stopped, and and drugs had been a part of their life as well, because that was the whole sort of scene of that industry and so on. And the wife said to Louis Theroux, if you want to be happy, you have to get off the drugs. Chet and I did that many times. At the first level, it sounds like a commentary on her experience. But she says, if you want to get off the drugs, and at that first level of meta model, we might think, well, hang on, surely she means, if I want to be happy, I have to get off the drugs. That isn't what she means. If you want to be happy, you have to get off the drugs. Chet and I did that many times. It's actually a hypnotic trance induction to turn you into a drug addict. This is a hypnotic trance induction to get us all to look at our phones. Because if we all do it, then... Sorry, Joanne or Joanne?
Joanne.
Joanne. If we all do it, then Joanne is normal. So she's telling us that we do it, and then we're all in the same boat. Looking. Just take that phrase by itself. Imagine that you sit down in a hypnotherapist comfy chair, and the hypnotherapist says to you, looking at your phone too much. What comes into your mind when I say that? Your phone? Yeah, it's not a command like look. Look at your phone too much. Looking. Too much is the interesting bit here. What does too much mean?
More than normal. More than normal.
More than normal. But she's told us that it's normal because she's asking us to agree with it. By saying looking at your phone too much, and we'll go, yeah, don't do that. We're all guilty of that. So we all join each other in this shared social experience, like the selfie, because we're a social species, and we want to show that we are together, we're in the same boat. Because as a social species, social cohesion and normalness and togetherness means what?
Safety.
Safety, and therefore survival. Yes. We'll die if we leave the social group, because we'll get eaten by a lion or a crocodile. Unless you've got a pocket of sparklers. Remember that. Don't go to Australia with, sir, could you tell me why you've got a suitcase full of sparklers? Well, anyway. So looking at your phone too much. Too much for, this is a comparison, isn't it? And the comparison's gone missing. Too much for,
Not for her.
how could it be too, yeah, well, how could it be for her? Because I guarantee she looks at her phone exactly the number of times in a day that she needs to. But but somebody else thinks it's too much. Somebody else says, you look at your phone again. What? You're going to put your phone down 5 minutes and pay attention to me. That's what? Yes?
It's actually a comment that I look at as soon as I wake up.
Yeah. Or sooner. Well, if it's your alarm clock. then-
Yeah, exactly, that's what
So, looking at your phone, she's trying to make it normal. She's trying to draw us in to her map of the world. So we all say, that's not that's normal. That's not too much. Have you looked at your phone in the last hour since I've been?
No.
Not once. There you go. Isn't you looking at your phone too much? It's the person who says that isn't interesting enough. What it boils down to. Too much tells us that she's making a comparison, and comparisons are always external. And therefore that tells us that it's not her that thinks it's too much, it's somebody else. Too much for. It's another incomplete sentence. So we can analyse just a simple statement that somebody makes, the very, very first statement that a client makes, even before they sit down and, for example, the coaching session begins. And what they said on the way in will tell you everything you need to know about what you're going to do with that person to help them to solve that problem. Being easily distracted and one task at a time, they seem quite similar, don't they? This was a statement of a problem, this one was a statement of a desired outcome. This is what solution? Belinda. This is what Belinda wants. And who said being easily distracted?
Natalia.
Natalia. So Natalia is easily distracted, Belinda wants one task at a time. So Natalia is telling us what she doesn't want, Belinda is telling us what she does want. That's interesting, that's important. Because I asked for problems, didn't I? And a simple problem, we got a design outcome solution. Solutions are very interesting because something like smoking or eating too much or those kinds of behaviours are not problems. What are they?
Activities.
We call them habits, activities, yes. They're actually solutions. They're solutions to a previous problem. Every problem is a solution to a previous problem. What is smoking? What is smoking a solution to?
Needing a cigarette.
Needing a cigarette, but
Cigarettes.
stress.
That's what most people use
Yes.
it for.
Smoking is a solution to the problem of stress. Stress is a solution to a previous problem. What is stress the solution to?
Coping with situations?
Yes.
Coping mechanisms?
Yes, being in conflicting situations where you don't want to tell either person to get stuff. So you try and do two things at the same time, the result is stress. Negative self-talk. What's your name? Eden. Negative self-talk. Sounds like something the computer on Star Trek would say. Negative self-talk, Captain. More power to the self-talk generator. How can you talk to yourself? How is that even possible? Because if I'm here, I'm not over there. How can I talk to myself? In my, but I'm not in my. How do I talk to myself? Logically. It's such a common thing that we talk in terms of self-talk and internal dialogue or whatever name we give it. And we're also used to that constant chatter inside our heads. And which way is it going to go this way? Let's just go in some directions. Which way is it? Oh, we should get out of the way. Constant, oh, am I doing this right? I don't know if this is right. Is it right? Am I doing it? I'm not sure. It's not your voice. Remember I said the brain or the mind is a simulator. So when you are hearing your own voice in your head, what you're hearing is a simulation. What is the purpose of a simulation? Like the one that you had at Old Trafford earlier this week. What's the purpose of a simulation? To prepare. Like that part of the brain that's repeating traumatic experiences over and over again. The purpose is to prepare. So what is negative self-talk? What are you saying to yourself? What are you preparing for?
Fight, flight, I'm not sure.
Fight.
Attack, or defence.
Defense.
Other people's reactions.
Right. Attack. So Egan's presuming she's being attacked. So she's preparing her defence. She's predicting, she's preparing, she's getting ready to fend off an attack or to whatever.
Explain why I haven't done something, possibly.
And negative. What does negative mean? Yeah, that's what we come to associate it with, don't we? We've come to associate negative and positive with bad and good. But actually, your brain and your body are a feedback system. Any electrical or mechanical engineers here? No? Okay. Feedback is a feedback system, a closed loop feedback system would have positive and negative feedback.
No, one or the other.
One or the other. Excellent. And positive feedback, what would be an example of positive feedback?
An oscillator, something got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's going to be our Taylor's case. That's a physical example.
Okay, and negative feedback, what would be an example of a system that had negative feedback?
It would damp. It would get damped and it would fade away and then stop working.
Okay, so if we were lucky enough to have an air conditioner in here, the air conditioner would be set at a certain temperature, and there'd be a thermostat in the room. And the thermostat would simply signal to the air conditioner, either switch on or switch off. And if the air temperature was warmer than the temperature that the air conditioning unit was set to, the thermostat would tell the air conditioner to do what? Come on. And when the air temperature gets to a certain level, it says you make a switch on. And what we get is, yeah, the air conditioner will switch on and off and on and off as the temperature level in the room goes above and below the level the thermostat set at. So that's a feedback, it's a closed loop feedback system. Positive feedback just means do more of this. And negative feedback just means do less of this. So the thermostat doesn't send a message to the air conditioner saying, bad air conditioner, you're useless, you've never amounted to anything. You're rubbish, I told you you couldn't get this really cold. Of course the air conditioner might interpret it that way, we don't know that. You know, these things are getting smarter. And you know, they talk about smart devices. And who's familiar with The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Marvin and Paranoid Android? Right. That's where it's going, isn't it, really? We give these things personalities. They'll get personality disorders. Positive feedback wouldn't be, oh, you're a great air conditioner. Wouldn't mind just cooling us a little bit more? Oh, that's fantastic. Lovely. Just a little. It's not too much trouble. Just a little. Would you mind? That's what people do at work. That's how people talk to each other at work. You idiots! Can't do anything right. And you wouldn't just mind, would you? That's super. That's really smashing. Doing a wonderful job there. Just wouldn't mind. If you just wouldn't mind, just. Maybe just possibly keep. I'll do it. I'll tell you what. You're busy. That's what we do at work, right? So positive and negative feedback in a feedback system, it doesn't mean good or bad. It just means more or less than. So what is your self-talk telling you to do less of?
It varies.
It varies.
It varies.
So don't say it out loud, but just think it in your head. This, what you've described as negative self-talk, if you concentrate on what is it telling you to do less of, and then ask it, how is that useful for me? Actually ask it in your head, how is that useful? What, do you get an answer?
Take less notice of it.
So if you listen to some of that negative self-talk, and inside your head you say to it, thank you, what do you suggest I do differently? What answer do you get?
Take no notice.
Take no notice. Okay, so the thing is, because it's a simulation, it sounds weird, but you can go into a conversation with it. Because it isn't real, it's just a simulation of you. And actually, it's become a simulation of you, but really you've learned it from where? Long before you had parents, typically parents or teachers, but the voice inside your head, especially when it's critical, tends to be parents or teachers, where it's originally acquired from. It becomes adapting over time, and obviously merge with your own voice and your own interests and feedback from other people. But fundamentally, your relationship that you have with yourself, or the simulation of yourself, which is your way of thinking about how other people see you. If you're critical of yourself, it's generally a way for you to minimise the emotional impact of your belief that other people are critical of you. Do you believe that other people are critical of you?
They have been.
They
Yeah,
have
I
been.
think I have internalised that parents and teachers. I'll fix on that one.
Yeah. And it's how we expect other people to treat us. The stuff we hear about ourselves when we're young, we expect everyone to see us that way because that's the only point of reference we've got. And as we get older and we grow up, nobody tells you that kind of feedback anymore. So how many of you have ever sat through a presentation at work, and at the end of the presentation the presenter has said, has anyone got any feedback for me?
I did it before at the beginning.
You did it. So yeah, you've all seen this quite recently. And you all kind of stare and look at each other and think, what do we say? It was very good. Because you don't know, you didn't expect to be asked to give feedback, so you don't know what to give feedback. And a way of people dealing with the stress of conflict is they try and get one step ahead. And they try and get ahead of the feedback or the criticism or the confrontation by doing it themselves to get ahead of and stop the other person from doing it. Does that make sense? And we can see it. It shows a complete advantage. So how are we doing for time? It's 20 to 9. Right then, what would you like to hear about in the next remaining, time-wise, I mean, we're due to finish at 9, obviously I arrived late, if I'm totally embarrassed about, sorry about that. We can finish at 9. I'm happy to go a bit longer. I will give you the choice. If anybody has to, be gone at 9, that's absolutely fine by me. I won't take it personally. That's another useful tip, actually. When people are being critical of each other at work, and people take it very personally. I was talking to a guy today who was taking it very personally when an idea or a business case or a project was rejected by his bosses. And he took it very personally. The thing I always say to people is, you know for a fact that it can't be personal. And it's so obvious that most people overlook it. How do you know for a fact that someone else's feedback of you, critical feedback or criticism or whatever it might be, how can you know for certain that that isn't personal?
Their opinion, not yours.
More obvious than that.
It's the project that was rejected, was it?
Yes,
So if it wasn't there, it'd still be rejected.
that's correct. More obvious than that. Because they don't know you. If they don't know you, how can what they say be personal? And therefore, if they don't know you and it isn't personal, who is their criticism really about? Themselves. So instead of feeling defensive, you can realise that when they're being... You probably noticed by now that the battery ran out of my video camera before my workshop was finished, so I didn't get to tell you the punchline, which is, of course, the title of the workshop was, why should you care about NLP? The answer, of course, is you shouldn't really. It's just a technology. It's a technology that happens to be very handy and very practical, but it's by no means the only one that's out there, and you'll pick one that's right for you. What you should care about is yourself. And anything that's going to help you to improve the quality of the relationships in your life, to be more effective at getting what you want, and being more for the people that are important to you, that's surely worth pursuing. So thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you again.